Hello everybody and welcome back. Good to talk to all of you again today. And today I got royally sidetracked. Originally I was going to do a video and talk about those new Italian cruisers. Talk about some of their new mechanics that are coming. The fuel smoke, the semi-armor piercing, and maybe talk about sort of the role that the NACC's had in sort of creating that fuel smoke little mechanic thingamabob. I don't know. But then I got really sidetracked. And that was because, the last two times I've been in Halifax, I wanted to go see HMCS Sackville. The first time I went there, she was closed because I guess I was just too late in the season or something for it. So first time around, not possible. Second time around, she'd gone into refit. So, third time's the charm, as they say. And so today, I was like, I'm going to go see her. And so this is me walking along Halifax's waterfront, which, by the way, is actually quite beautiful. And it is probably a place I will go quite a bit, just because it is a really, really relaxing place. And possibly, depending on what's around at the time, might be able to bring a camera, set it all up, and actually do a little bit of ship spotting. Hopefully be able to catch a couple of interesting ships going to and fro. And I might upload that onto YouTube as well. Actually, I was passing by this kind of fancy yacht. It's not the biggest one that I saw today. There was another one. I was closer to the cruise ship terminal, like really fancy. And so here you go. You can start to see there is HMCS Sackville. She's a Flower class corvette. They built a whole lot of these during World War II as a convoy escort. And yeah, having been on other warships, going on to Sackville, wow, there was some really interesting experiences on that ship. Something that, just you wouldn't really think you would experience on a museum ship that's like really sort of just docked at a harbor. Like, you just don't think that that's some of the things that you experience or feel. And that's kind of the reason I think that if you ever get a chance and you're ever in Halifax, you should really get onto the ship, assuming that you're here during, I guess, the summer months when the ship is actually open to the public. Really should get on it just to get that experience of being on a ship this size. I've been on the other sort of Canadian museum ship, HMCS Haida, and it's just a very different experience. Haida is a bit bigger, and when you get onto, and when I say bigger, she's still only a destroyer. You get onto it, you can feel that she's different, right? Sackville, and I'm not sure you'll see this in the video just because this is sort of more stabilized footage, but Sackville, you can feel the ship going up and down and up and down, and you're tied up to the pier. So you can imagine what it be like for you to be in this little ship in the middle of the North Atlantic Ocean. And the Flower class corvettes were mentioned to be, by sailors at the time, to be sort of really, really rough ships to be on, cause quite a bit of seasickness. Anyways, as I was walking towards it, saw this bit of a memorial to the Canadian merchant seamen. And it was nice to see that there were still wreaths and things laid there. So it's kind of neat. So here we go. We're gonna move towards the ship. Interestingly enough, I don't know what was going on today, but to get onto the ship was actually free today, but there was a donation box if you wanted to donate. So definitely did that. And of course, as usual, bought myself a hat. It's like I have a hat collection of ships I have gone to. And Sackville's no different. I have a nice little hat for her now. Anyways, this is going to be sort of just like me walking along the outside of the ship, and you'll notice that she's not really all that big. Right at the stern there is some depth charge, racks for dropping depth charges. You'll notice that there is a pom-pom right there on top. There's a bit of a small interesting story apparently about that pom-pom. She doesn't really have a lot of armament, mind you. And there's a couple of depth charge launchers that you'll see right there, and you'll see again when I actually get onto the ship. And she's not really big at all. Okay, excuse the shack. This is like the tiny little gift shop. This is actually where I went to buy the hat. And then you'll actually see on like when you get onto the ship that this ship feels like it's basically living area, small command area, the weapon systems, the pretty big engine taking up most of the space, and like that's it. And then there is the forward 4-inch gun. And so yeah, there we go, just walking towards the front. She's not big at all. Like all the other ships that I've ever been on, museum ship wise, were like way bigger. This is the smallest one by far. And yet to think that these small ships played a really, really pivotal role during the Second World War for the Allies. Just incredible, right? And so, yep, there we go. This is the front of the ship, and now we're going to get onto it, and I'll show you around, I guess, to the best of my abilities. Obviously, the first and biggest draw on the ship is this particular 4-inch gun. Very interestingly, this particular 4-inch gun actually still rotates and moves around. You're actually able to get in there, and there's a couple of these, like, I don't know, wheels that you can kind of turn, and the gun actually still turns around, and you actually see a bunch of kids doing that, and you know the guns will actually move from left to right. It's pretty neat, actually, considering that you know, it's a museum ship, and a lot of museum ships, most of the gun turrets and stuff like that are like sort of fixed in one place. Right across there is actually another museum ship that belongs to I think the Maritime Museum here in Halifax. It is the ship called the Acadia, I believe, and it was like a research vessel, oceanographic vessel, I think. I don't know, haven't really looked into it. I see it there. I will visit it another time, which probably means that yes, I will probably do another walk around, film some stuff there, and put it back onto YouTube, because it's fun to share these things with you guys, you know. Anyways, so yeah, you can see that there was the gun turret, and that's sort of like the big thing. And then right on the side here is the anti-submarine Hedgehog weaponry, which is quite nice, although these ones are made out of wood. Yeah, I don't really think they're gonna find like the real thing anymore. And you know, it gives you a pretty good impression of what the system looks like. There we go, looking back at the gun turret, and you can see, there we go, it actually moves back and forth, which is super cool, at least for me, because all the other museum ships I've been on, the guns are like, okay, no, the guns are locked. And there's no way for you to actually manipulate them. It does take more than one person to do it, though. Anyways, walking past the wheelhouse, actually, you'll notice that there was that little transition cut. And it was because I had gone into the wheelhouse, and the footage that I caught was absolutely terrible. The wheelhouse is tiny. It's just, there wasn't much there. It was a wheel, couple of voice tubes, you know, the engine controls, and you know, there was one bed for the captain, and there was a wireless room, also really, really, really small. All right, so going down sort of around the midsection of the ship there, you'll notice that there were these depth charge launchers. Now, HMCS Sackville, she primarily did Atlantic convoy escort duty, so for her, anti-submarine weapons were going to be sort of key. Other Flower-class corvettes, depending on their theater of operations, would have other weapons. So, for example, I believe the ones that served in Mediterranean convoy escort duties would have sort of enhanced anti-aircraft armament. So there was sort of some variability between ship to ship. So, yep, here we go. I'm going to get to the stern of the ship, and as you'll notice, the ship just isn't very big. It's actually quite fast to walk from bow to stern. Total ship length is 62.5 meters. Like I said, not a very big ship. Anyways, over in the distance there that I was looking that direction, if I remember correctly, that's where the Canadian Atlantic Fleet has a lot of their ships parked there. So I don't know, if I ever get a chance there, I might be able to go there and take some video or whatnot. And yeah, again, you know, nothing illegal, not gonna like jump over any barriers or anything like that, just, you know, whatever I can catch that is cool. You know, there is a lot of Halifax class frigates that occasionally come in here, so those are pretty cool. Anyhow, so yes, those were the two depth charge racks off the back of the ship that I sort of pointed out earlier. And then there is this doorway, which I will go through, and there was actually a lot of people down there, so I couldn't get in there initially. So there's going to be a little bit of a cut, and I'll take you down there. Actually, I'm going to go up here first because there's people down there. All right, so going up here, this is where that pom-pom was, that single 2-pounder pom-pom anti-aircraft gun was. And interestingly enough, this particular gun was actually donated by the Irish Naval Services. So, yeah, there's an interesting little, like, how did this come all the way, right? So, yeah. I'm going to get myself turned around here. Come on. Get myself turned around. There's a little bit of artwork there, too. Not really sure if it's original art, but hey, it's still nice that it's there. Anyway, the ship has been sort of restored back to our 1944 configuration. So here we go. There's a sign for it. There's the 2-pounder pom-pom. It was formerly the Irish Naval Service, and it was donated by the Department of Defense Ireland. So pretty cool that it made its way all the way here onto HMCS Sackville. So all right, now I'm going to go down and get into that little room, hopefully. You will notice that there is going to be a very, very small little cut because there are a whole bunch of people coming out. And I was like, oh, yeah. There we go, little cut, and now I'm going to make my way down underneath into this little tiny space. Yeah, it's a really tight fit, and this space here is like a little crew compartment for some sleeping space, you know. Yeah, it's not really all that big. In some of the older, at least back in the original day when the ships were being built, some of the original Flower class corvettes, this space here was actually the galley. And, you know, the galley being so far away from where all the crew quarters were actually made it really challenging. So later on when they changed the ships, the galley got moved to midships. And these spaces, depending on, again, sort of location of service, theater of service, got converted into other things, right? Some of them made this area into like additional, whatchamacallit, depth charge storage. And in the ship right now, this is apparently some crew bunks and things like that. So anyways, yeah, just tiny little room. Going up, oof, tight fit there. And I will show you something that is really cool. Remember what I said earlier, the ship is basically weapon systems, the engine room, like, you know, and wherever the crew needed to be to sleep and to eat. But here we go. The little ships that save the day, right? Yeah, for sure. All right, so here we go. This is, get ready for this. Watch this. The engine room. Now remember the size of the ship and take a look at that. That's a huge amount of space being taken up by the engines. These are actually triple expansions engines. They're not steam turbines. And the reason they actually did this, you know, the whole triple expansion engines and not steam turbines, is because most of the people who would be serving on these ships would be like reservists, and they would be far more comfortable with commercial triple expansion engines rather than sort of naval steam turbine engines. And it allowed them to really produce these ships quite quickly and in large numbers. All right, so stepping out from there, so there's 2 more of these depth charge launchers, and I'm just going to walk a little bit further forward and take you to another compartment, which was not very big, but also sort of interesting and of note, which is right here to my left, where the young lady with the red sweater just stepped out. And in this area, whoop, okay, gotta kind of move out of the way here. Hold on, there we go, waiting for him to come out. All right, here we go. So this space here, and hopefully I'm going to be able to look down here, this is actually where the boilers are. And there's actually a pretty kind of interesting story with HMCS Sackville, and sort of her preservation is a bit of a luck story, because one of her boilers, whether it was a design or build, construction, or some kind of operational issue, one of her boilers was basically broken, and it caused the ship to basically not be able to be returned to service, sort of 1944-ish. So at the time, you know, later on in the war, she wasn't that essential, so they didn't really need to get her back into service. So they decided, instead of putting her back out into combat operations, they would just convert her into a training ship. So she was actually able to, continue serving in a training role. After World War II was over, she was decommissioned. Oh, by the way, this is where the galley got moved to, right? Middle of the ship. And so this is because you'll notice from here to the front, I think it's just under the forecastle, there is like another crew compartment. You can sort of see it's easier to get food from there to the front of the ship rather than where like the galley was originally way at the back. Anyway, so back to the interesting luck story, right? So the ship got converted into a training ship, and then she served in that role for a couple of years, and then eventually she was taken over by the Department of Marine and Fisheries as a research ship, and she would continue in that role sort of all the way into like the 1980s. Interesting thing is, sort of around the late 1970s, they were looking for a Flower class ship to preserve so that they could convert it into a museum. And at first, they were looking at a former Flower class ship that served in the Canadian Navy that got sold to Dominican Republic, but that ship got wrecked in 1979 during Hurricane David. That hurricane also wrecked another Flower class corvette in service with the Dominican Navy, and so with no other options remaining, Sackville got preserved. This part is also pretty cool.
You are now in the forward mess deck, located in the forecastle of the ship, where up to 29 seamen slept, ate, and spent their off-duty time. There was a continuous coming and going of seamen in this area. As each 4 hours, men came on and went off duty. As a result, getting uninterrupted sleep was always a problem. At the moment, only a few of the hammocks and their occupants are slung. At mealtime, food was collected from the galley by one of the seamen and brought here to be eaten. Directly forward on the left, or port side, you can see the cupboard used to store the dishes and cutlery used at mealtime. After each meal, the dishes were washed up in buckets of hot water, when available. The seamen entertained themselves during off-duty hours by writing letters home, playing cards, checkers, and when the ship was in harbor, they listened to phonograph records or the radio. To your immediate left and right, you will notice duffel coats and rain gear hung up on pegs. On the long shelves above the padded benches, there are many round boxes. Each seaman had one of these in which he kept his caps and other personal articles. On the shelves below the hat boxes, you can see a few small leather cases. Each man had one of these in which he kept shorts, socks, gloves, and small articles of clothing. Underneath the benches were other compartments which provided additional storage space. To starboard, that is to your right, you will notice the door to the rather small refrigeration locker, which held all perishable food for use by the entire crew of approximately 90 men. The hatch through the deck to your immediate right leads to the lower deck below, where the stokers lived in equally crowded conditions. As you leave the area, notice the high door sill you have stepped over. This sill prevented water from making its way forward when the ship took on seawater during heavy weather. The vertical ladder in the middle of the mess deck leads to a hatch through the upper deck. It is provided for an emergency escape route should the need arise.
Anyways, one other thing to sort of add on to the previous thing I was talking about, which is that originally when they were going to convert her back into the museum ship, by the way, they were going to return her to her 1942 configuration, but it ended up being too expensive, so they returned her to her 1944 configuration. Also, is this a prophecy for World of Warships? I can just imagine the salt if that ship class makes it in. Anyways, continuing out this part of the ship, just gonna have to duck out here for a second. Hang on. There we go. Yeah, not exactly the most amount of facilities either. Alright, so you walk down this particular hallway and you're ready to go back up on top. And where I'm gonna go now is essentially where the command area would be on the ship. So the wheelhouse is tiny, and thank God at least that part's enclosed, because where the command area would be is actually open, like completely just open to the elements. And so, yikes. Can't really imagine what the experience would have been like to be in that kind of an area in the North Atlantic, escorting convoys. Just cannot imagine at all. And you'll see what I mean as I walk up this little flight of stairs, and this is the command area. Like, this is where the captain would have spent some time, the officers would have been up here, and it's just open to the elements. So, man, just wow. Just wow. And speaking of convoy escort duty as well, HMCS Sackville served from February of 1942 all the way to, I believe my memory is correct, July of 1944, if I remember correctly. During the time, she escorted 30 convoys, totaling 1,380 merchant ships, containing about 90,000 merchant seamen, actually, if I remember all the numbers correctly. In all that time, only 9 of the ships that she was escorting were sunk. It's quite a feat, actually. She had one very sort of significant engagement on convoy ON 115. This happened July 25 to the 4th of August 1942. Engaged in a pretty ferocious battle with a U-boat wolf pack. She actually managed to damage 2 of the U-boats and basically put them out of service for a while. She would also fight one other really big engagement with convoy ONS-18 and ON-202, and this happened 19 to the 25th of September 1943. 7 ships were actually torpedoed in total. 6 of them were sunk, including 3 warships. And that was a pretty significant action. The reason actually it all happened is because the Germans had actually developed a new acoustic torpedo. And the whole plan for the Germans was, hey, if we can use these acoustic torpedoes to kill the warships, then the entire convoy would become defenseless, right? The Allies kind of got an idea that the Germans were doing this, so they really beefed up the escort for these convoys, and they sort of combined them together, and they basically ended up fighting this huge, long-running engagement with this big German wolf pack. So that was also one hell of a battle as well. Anyways, with the forward gun emplacement now no longer occupied, I decided that I was going to wrap up the little tour of the day by walking to the front of the ship and checking out the actual gun turret myself. So here I am. I'm going to sort of climb up this little tiny ladder here, and I'm going to go check out this little gun here. Yeah, it's a small gun, and there's only one of them. Actually, one of the sort of stories about this gun, if I remember correctly, was when she was engaging the U-boats, when she was protecting the convoy 115, the one in 1942, her forward 4-inch gun was actually able to hit the conning tower of one of the U-boats, effectively putting it out of service. So, good shooting there. And it's not like this is one of those super complex gun mounts. Like, didn't really see a lot of complexity, so being able to hit effectively, like, good shooting there, right? Yeah, take a look at it. It's just not a very complicated system at all. Single 4-inch gun as well. Usually they would, I think if I remember correctly, the tactic would be, spot the U-boat on the surface with radar or whatever, charge right in there, fire the guns, drop the torpedoes, drive the U-boat away, and then quickly return to protect the convoy. Anyways, folks, I hope you enjoyed today's little video. I'll, of course, talk to all of you again tomorrow, and hopefully I'll get back on track and talk about Italian ships or something. Anyways, have yourselves a good one, and I'll talk to all of you again really, really soon.